Hello, I'm Julie Smith, Potter County Clerk, and you're listening to Texas County Voice, a podcast for all 254 counties. Thank you for listening.
Hello, and welcome to Texas County Voice. I'm Jody Seaborn with the Texas Association of Counties. In today's episode, we traveled to Guadalupe County, where Elections Administrator Lisa Hayes started an innovative program last year to help build trust in our elections. The Texas Association of Counties recently recognized the program she created, the Citizens Election Academy, with a County Best Practices Award for its hands-on approach to educating voters about the election process, from voter registration to reporting results. So stay tuned as we talk with Lisa Hayes about how the Academy works, the misconceptions it addresses, and why transparency in our elections is more important than ever. Well, welcome to Texas County Voice, Ms. Hayes.
Thank you.
Let's just start by letting me ask you just a few questions about yourself. How long have you been elections administrator here in Guadalupe County?
I've been the elections administrator here in Guadalupe County since April of 2015.
And what did you do before that?
Before that, I did a couple of things. I started actually in this office in 1998 as a voter registration clerk. And I was here until 2006, and I had worked my way up to assistant elections administrator. And then the family moved to Dallas, and I actually went to work for our voting equipment vendor up in Dallas, programming elections and running elections from the corporate side rather than the county side. And so I did that for a number of years, took a little break from elections for 3 years, and then I couldn't stay away anymore, and so I came back.
So you've been around elections a long time.
Yes.
Most of your professional career?
Absolutely.
Did you grow up here in Seguin?
No, I actually grew up in El Paso.
Okay.
I grew up in El Paso, and we moved to Seguin because of my husband's work. So that brought us out here and fell in love with it.
Well, we're here because you have a program, Citizens Election Academy, that you started in 2023, which recently received a County Best Practices Award from the Texas Association of Counties. So what inspired you to create the Academy, and how did you decide on its curriculum?
So it was actually a combination of events that occurred that turned into the Elections Academy for us. We often have to scale up quickly to do elections. We can't keep the same number of people on staff that we need all the time for elections. So we bring in temp workers. Often these temp workers are our early voting clerks, our election judges, people who have some familiarity with elections and have a little extra time to give to us. And consistently, their surprise at everything that went on behind the scene was very interesting to me, because I considered that they already knew more about elections than the average voter because they worked the polls. They were always amazed at everything that happened behind the scenes. They came and helped with mail ballots or equipment testing, and they were just blown away by the quantity of work and the moving parts that we have here. Not too distantly from that, my husband and I had gone to the local Citizens Police Academy run by our local police department. We were interested in what was going on behind the scenes. We were curious. We like to learn new things. So we attended their academy, and we were blown away by their dedication and their self-policing and how much they care about building bridges in the community. And so after we finished that course, I thought to myself, we need to do something like this for elections. Why couldn't we do something like this for elections? And so that is really what kicked it off, is, thinking about it, trying to decide how could you break down something as large and cumbersome as an election into bite-sized pieces, that the attendees could digest and understand and not feel overwhelmed. And so that was really what made us want to do it. I thought we could do this. We could do this, and everybody who wanted to attend could benefit from it.
Well, this is a big election year because of the presidential election, but you're running elections all the time. Counties run all kinds of elections. You want to talk a little bit about that pace?
That's one of the things that we talk about in our academy, too, is the election timeline. Most people don't realize that the election starts months prior to the election. And so that was one of the important things for us to share with them, is that we do elections and election-related tasks all year round. We do voter registration and list maintenance all year round. It's not that we don't do anything the other 364 days of the year. And so that was very educational for the voters, and I think they appreciated a lot more when they realized this is actually a full-time job.
And you're doing elections like school boards?
Correct. School boards, water districts, cities, municipal utility districts. If there's an election in our county, we generally contract to do it.
What were some of the biggest misconceptions about elections that you hoped to address with the Citizens Election Academy?
I think one of the biggest misconceptions that we were hoping to address is that there seems to be a large cross-section of voters that seem to feel we do not want their vote to count. They seem to feel that our goal is to prevent them from voting, and that couldn't be farther from the truth. So aside from the legal requirements we have that we count every eligible vote, we put a lot of work into an election, into preparing for an election, and we like to think of it as we're planning a party basically for 130,000 people, right? That's how many registered voters we have. We're doing the same work, whether 2 voters or 20,000 voters come out to vote. So I would like that they would all come out to vote because we've done the work. We've put the time in. We're ready for them. This is what we're here for. This is why we do this. And so that was actually something that I really wanted to address with the attendees in person when they could see that we're passionate about elections. This is what we do because we love it. This is a hard job. No one does this because it's an easy job. And we wanted to address that. And I think that was one of my main goals. I mean, there's other misconceptions. There's security concerns. There's things like that. But I think overarching is, why are we here and why are we doing this? You know, we want voters to vote. Every vote does count, and they need to know that we're passionate about that and we care about it.
Have those security concerns grown deeper over the past few years?
Absolutely. The amount of scrutiny that the elections industry is in now compared to 1998 when I started has changed drastically, and the voters are concerned, and it's a number of issues. You know, we are more technologically advanced, but with those advantages come some concerns, and there's security issues. And so the voters are worried about that. And there's a lot of misinformation out there. Some of it is malicious and some of it is just poor information. But because it's so easy to access information, whether it's correct or not, you know, the voters receive information from places that have nothing to do with us, and they don't have a way to judge what's true and what's not. And so this was another way that we could say, look, you've got election officials in a room with you. We're showing you what we do, and you can ask us those hard questions. That's what we're here for.
Well, your Elections Academy has 4 modules. Can you give us an overview of those modules?
Sure. So Module 1 is what we consider our foundational module. It talks about the different agencies, federal, state, and the county, and how we interact to conduct elections. It gives us a chance to introduce ourselves to the attendees and let them introduce themselves to us and give us a little bit of information about why are they attending. And that's very valuable because that helps us when we answer their questions too, because we know what their concerns are right off the bat. We talk about voter registration and how important it is, and all the different jurisdictions in the county and how those all interact and divide up the county so that the voters get a specific ballot style and races that they're eligible to vote on. And what they should do if they get a ballot and they go, I don't think this is the right content. I don't think these people are who I should be voting for. You know, how do they address that at the polls? And so that's our first module. There's not as much hands-on in that one, but we do a lot more discussion, kind of getting a feel for each other. The second module is mail ballots and voting by mail. We talk about the difference between voting by mail and voting in person and the requirements for voting by mail. You know, that there's ID requirements are there in place for both methods of voting. We show the similarities and the differences. And then our attendees actually get to perform the functions of the early voting ballot board and review mail ballot envelopes and mail ballots created from real life circumstances and for our mock election. And they actually get to decide based on the criteria in the election code, would this ballot be accepted for counting? Would this be rejected and sent up for correction? What do we do? And so they actually get to experience that real time, the decision making, the bipartisan teams. And it's very, very interesting to see their reactions to those duties and the responsibility of those duties, and also to the fact that even in the midst of doing mail ballot review, the voter's secret ballot is still maintained.
So when you're reviewing mail-in ballots, you have a panel that reviews them, made up of members of each party?
Right. So we have what we call the early voting ballot board, and that is bipartisan. So they work in teams, one Republican, one Democrat, and that's a team. And the way we do it here is that they do everything as a team. So if one person, they look at everything together. The whole board doesn't generally make a decision unless a team can't agree. And at that point, that may go to the presiding judge of the ballot board or the alternate judge.
And what are they looking for?
So the things they're looking for, the law requires that voters put some identification numbers on the application and on the envelope. They want to see that those match. They're checking to make sure the voter signed their carrier envelope and that signature matches their application. And they're making sure the ballot is for this election. And then once the carrier envelope has passed that review, then they'll begin opening those ballot envelopes, separating them from the carrier envelope so we can't see how a voter voted. And then they'll review the ballots to see if there's any marks that may not be countable on our scanner. Did they overvote a race? Did somebody spill their coffee on the ballot? Did it get torn when we were opening? Just different things that might slow down the scanning process when we go to tabulation.
I can imagine maybe the signature part of it is one that could be the trickiest, because I know myself, my signature, from day to day can be a little more precise and a little less precise.
It is very challenging, and they're not signature, handwriting experts. But there are some things that seem to be consistent. There's loops and angles, and usually if there is a question, because of the way the law is written now, those carrier envelopes can be submitted for corrective action. So now what corrective action does is gives the voter a vehicle to correct a deficiency in that envelope. So say they forgot to put their ID number on there, or their signature doesn't match according to the ballot board. We notify them with a letter or a call, and then they have an opportunity to correct that defect. And if they can correct that defect, then that ballot is still countable.
So if they come to your office?
We had a voter whose signature was completely different. It did not look the same at all. We sent a letter of defect to them, and they came in, and they were right-handed and had broken their right arm.
Oh.
And so she had to sign with her left. And she did that in front of us, and we were able to see, this is the person. She showed her ID and able to explain that away. Prior to the corrective action process, that voter's ballot would have been rejected, and she would not have known till after the election. So the corrective action process has been very beneficial.
Well, back to the modules. So there were the mail-in ballots, Module 2.
Right. Module 3 is, I think, our fan favorite module, and that's where we do a little more in-depth on election preparations, such as logic and accuracy testing. So we explain the process and the logic, if you will, behind logic and accuracy testing. And we talk about how we make the logistical decisions of how much equipment, how many ballots are sent to the polls, all of these things. We go over the timelines again. I love to show them timelines because they think the calendar looks really empty. And when I lay all our timelines and our deadlines over each other, it's a whole different thing. In the logic and accuracy module, we hand them a pre-marked test deck for our mock election that we're conducting, and we explain to them how to test the equipment. And they actually, in pairs, vote the test deck, close the polls, print the results, and then we compare the results to our spreadsheet that we provided to them because we know what the results should be ahead of time. It's been very interesting because we have had attendees that deliberately did not vote the ballots correctly. I think they wanted to see if our process actually worked, and it does, and we caught it. And in real life, we would zero everything out and start all over again. And so that was one of those interesting conversations where I told them, I was like, look, if you guys had done this in our test, you wouldn't be invited back because you're not following directions, and you'd have to redo it.
Just to be clear, so that there's no misunderstanding, when you say you know the result ahead of time, you're talking about this test that you're doing.
Right, exactly.
You're not talking about the real election.
Nobody knows the results of that one. No, so what we do in preparation for our logic and accuracy test is we have a pre-marked test deck that votes every race, every candidate, every precinct, every ballot style, and we tally that deck ahead of time, that test deck. So before we even start our logic and accuracy testing, we know what the test should result in. We know what our results should look like. And that's so that we can test the functionality of the voting equipment and make sure it's counting correctly. Occasionally, because we have humans involved and they're doing the testing, they make mistakes. When we find a mistake like that and the results don't match, rather than assuming it was voter error, because we never want to assume that, right? It could be the equipment, that's why we're testing it. So we actually zero that whole test out and start all over. And every time it's been voter error. But we don't want to take any chances.
Right.
And so we test all the things that the voters might do to it. We try to insert 2 ballots. We try to overvote races. We insert blank ballots. The ballot goes in upside down. I mean, all the things that we think a voter might do, we make sure that the equipment can withstand all of those scenarios and not lose accuracy.
And Module 4?
Module 4 is election day.
So is this a mock?
It's a mock election that we programmed just for the academy. It's only got a couple races. What is your favorite ice cream, your favorite meal, your favorite day of the week, your favorite pet kind of thing. So Module 4 is election day, and usually one of our staff members serves as the presiding judge of central count, and then our attendees are the clerks. And they open the polls. They run the zero reports. They verify seals to make sure that the equipment they sealed at testing is still sealed and that those seals have not been invalidated. And then they actually vote also. They're the voter and the poll worker. And then we close the polls, run results reports. We reconcile our votes and our voters. And then we take everything to tabulation. And they come to tabulation and they watch us upload all of these results. And they get to see what that process looks like and how we add in the early voting ballot by mail ballots that they had approved for counting. We've counted them, and now we have a complete look at our unofficial results.
What challenges did you face as you were developing the academy, and how did you overcome them?
I think one of the main challenges we had initially was how to be transparent without compromising the security of future elections. So it's a constant balancing act. The other challenge was, how to break this very complicated machine into small, digestible pieces. But the transparency is always a challenge. We want to show that we have chain of custody. We're showing our work, basically. But we also need to ensure the security of the future elections. And so we had some learning moments in there when we were building this curriculum.
How long did the academy last? Was it one module over a period of a few weeks?
We've done it a couple different ways. The first one was one module a week for 4 weeks, and the modules were about an hour and a half in length. We did refine that down a little, and what we've iterated to now is 2 modules a night, so we can get it done in 2 weeks, because we do 1 night a week for 2 weeks. And then the attendees are there for about 3 hours. And that seems manageable. They like that. I think it improves attendance because they don't have to give up 4 nights of the week. It's worked out really well. And on the final night, election night, we don't just do the election and tabulate. We talk about post-election. What happens? Why did the numbers change between election night and when the entity canvasses, right? Because we have late and provisional ballots that are countable that come in, that are eligible. Their numbers always are going to change after that election, and they were completely surprised by that. They thought when those numbers changed every election that there was something wrong, that we were doing something nefarious. They had no idea that we expect that.
And then you have to, after Election Day, there's another process.
Right.
Do you want to talk a little bit about that post-Election Day process?
Right. So after Election Day, we have several different processes. One is the ballot board will meet again to review those late and provisional ballots that are countable. And then additionally, we have a post-election audit that we do after every election. And that's the other thing that surprises them. We have to do what's called a partial manual count after every election, where the Secretary of State gives us a series of precincts and races that have to be counted, and we manually count those ballots in those races and those precincts to ensure that the results match the electronic records from our election. That happens every election, and it's very time-consuming, but it's very important because that provides checks and balances, right? Everything we do is about checks and balances. And so they're always extremely reassured when they see that we have these checks and balances in place. It never occurred to them that we did any of these things.
And results become official
After the canvass.
And that's what, about 2 weeks later?
There's a window, a canvassing window, but yes, approximately. And so, yeah, they didn't know that. They thought election night, that was it. The election was done. There were no more votes to be counted. And I think they were reassured to find out this is actually the way it's supposed to work. The numbers will change, generally speaking, unless it's a very small election. The numbers should go up after that point.
In Texas, there's early voting, mail-in ballots, election day ballots, provisional ballots.
Mm-hmm.
When are each of those counted?
So we can count early voting ballots after the polls open on election day, and that's when they're allowed to be counted. The numbers cannot be released until the polls close on election night. Mm-hmm. So early voting in our county, we typically release early voting results at 7:01. Generally speaking, if everything goes well and the way we want it to, we release our early voting by mail results at the same time, because ballot board starts meeting several weeks before election day to process those mail ballots. And so that's important. And then election day results are tabulated basically at the polls, right? People feed their ballots into the precinct counter and it counts it right then. But that's not accumulating all of those results. So those results have to be brought back to central count, which is our office here, by the election judge, and then those are tabulated with the early voting and early voting and mail ballots. But each of those categories is clearly delineated in the report, so the voters can see once we get to 7 o'clock and we start releasing results, the early voting numbers shouldn't change unless they're by mail, and that's its own category. So there's a level of transparency that's there if they knew to look for it.
And the provisional ballot, someone who may have an issue of one kind or another can cast a provisional ballot, but that ballot is not counted until it's confirmed that they're legally allowed to vote.
That's correct. The voter registrar does some research to determine if that voter was actually eligible to vote in that election, and if they were, that ballot would be counted. Or maybe they had a defect that needed correcting, or maybe they didn't bring their ID to the polls, and all they have to do is bring their ID to the elections office by the deadline, and then their ballot counts. So that can be quite a job after the election to work through all of those provisionals, but it's important.
Feedback to the Academy was overwhelmingly positive, and you've touched on this a little bit already, but what changes in perceptions or attitudes did you observe from the attendees?
So the attendees have been, generally speaking, impressed and reassured with our processes. I think...
And that was your primary goal,
yes,
was to build trust, ensure trust, and to
yes,
reassure voters.
We want to build bridges into our community. We live here, we work here, we vote here. This is our county. And so to have the voters feel like when they come to our office to vote, they see familiar faces, they know us to some degree, and they're confident that we are conducting the election within the confines of the law, not just because it's the law, but because it matters to us. I think that has been very beneficial. We've had attendees that decided to be poll workers based on their attendance at the Academy. They thought, this looks really interesting. I've actually had a surprising number of our existing poll workers that attend the Academy because they like seeing what happens outside of the polling place. But it was really rewarding in every Academy. I wasn't expecting to get this from the Academy. The feedback from the attendees when they realize how passionate we are and how much we care about what we do. I was expecting the Academy to be a chance for me to give information out and to show our work and show that we're transparent. And what I was not expecting was the reminder of how much I love elections and how much I love what I do and how important the voters are. We know the voters are important, but when we get these interactions with them at the academy, it's different than when they come in to vote. Because when they come in to vote, maybe they're in a hurry, maybe we're in a hurry, we've got 50,000 other things going on. This is a relaxed environment. So the stress is not there, right? It's a lot different when you come in and you have time to visit and you know you've got time and there's no pressure and everything doesn't hinge on this very moment like it does when you vote. And so that has been extremely rewarding.
When is the next academy?
So the next academy is going to be in the spring of 2025. I'm hoping that we can start running it in February or March. I'd like to get to where we have a regular schedule where the voters just know that every other month or however often it is that we run an academy up until we bump into election. But I need to refine that a little bit and make sure that we're not spreading ourselves also too thin, because we do have election duties and the staff loves to participate with this. They've enjoyed it. It's been beneficial for them too. It's helped them build relationships with the voters. It's helped them gain confidence in their knowledge of their field. And so I want to keep affording that opportunity to them in a way that does not add to their stress level and makes it as rewarding as it can be.
Well, for other counties considering something similar, what advice would you have for them?
I would definitely recommend a pilot program.
Test it out first.
Test it out first. Also, if you can get the support of your commissioner's court and your county judge, that's tremendous. We had an amazing amount of support from the county. Our pilot group actually included our county auditor. She was happy to participate and brought a really great viewpoint to our class. So the more actively engaged I think your commissioner's court and your judge can be, at least in supporting the program, because I did run it by them before I started putting it together, the better. But I think the pilot program is the big thing. Get that out of the way, because you will learn a lot about what you think people want to know when you do a pilot program.
Well, I really appreciate your time, because we have, the November 5th presidential election. Presidential elections, the interest always ratchets up, right? What preparations have you made to ensure a smooth election day?
We have been preparing for this election since basically January. We have hired more poll workers than we think we're going to need.
You feel good that you have the good number of poll workers?
We've gotten a great response to our need for poll workers. We have ordered as many supplies times 3 as we think we're going to need. It's very hard to predict voter turnout. We're a vote center county, so our voters can go to any of our locations on election day, which is tremendous benefit to the voters, but a logistical challenge for us sometimes to try and determine where we think they're going to go based on historical data. With a constantly growing county like we've got new voters coming in to the county, so it's very hard to predict where a new voter into the county is going to want to go vote. But we're doing our best to make sure we've got the technical support, we've got the supplies, we have done everything we can possibly think of to make sure that we've got it managed. We know there are going to be things that we have not planned for, but we're trying to cover all the things we know we can plan for so that we have the bandwidth to deal with those other things.
How many registered voters are in Guadalupe County?
We have approximately 130,000 registered voters.
What is the turnout typically in a presidential year?
In a presidential, we're probably looking at 69%.
Right.
Yeah. It'll be interesting to see what we see this year. I think there's a lot of interest in this election. Mm-hmm. I hope the voters take advantage of some of the tools that we have out there for them, like sample ballots and things like that, to become informed. I think it makes the process at the polling place go a little more smoothly when they're ready for it. I hope they take the time to learn that they can't bring their cell phones into the polling place and then they can't wear campaign T-shirts and buttons and hats and things like that. Those are all the things that we tell them about, but it really does help when they are aware of those things and they abide by those laws before they come into the polls.
And that they can trust the results?
Absolutely, that they can trust the results. I love the fact that when we have the academy, people are comfortable enough to ask questions, because that is the perfect opportunity. They have an election professional in the room with them that they can ask questions of. And I like it when they take advantage of that. And sometimes they're a little hesitant at first, I think, to ask those questions. But as the academy proceeds and as we spend more time together, they become much more comfortable asking those questions. And I feel it by the time the academy is over, they're very comfortable asking their questions. And if they had questions in the future, I don't think they would hesitate to come and ask them.
Well, congratulations on receiving the County Best Practices Award, and good luck with the election. And I really appreciate the time you've given me today, because I know this is a crazy, crazy busy time of the year for you.
Well, thank you. We really appreciate being selected for the award. It was an amazing notification to receive.
That's all for today's episode of Texas County Voice. A big thank you to Guadalupe County Elections Administrator Lisa Hayes for taking time out of her busy schedule and sharing her experiences and insights with us. The 2024 general election is Tuesday, November 5th. Early voting begins October 21st and continues through November 1st. The last day to apply for a ballot by mail is October 25th. Visit our show page on county.org for links to additional information about today's episode. Look for Texas County Voice under the Resources tab on the homepage of county.org. And please subscribe to Texas County Voice for more conversations with local leaders making a difference in Texas counties. We'll see you next time.